Welcome to Uncommon Sense, where we do our best to make it common again. I'm your host, Adrian Ahlquist, and today I'm joined once again with my dad, Dale Ahlquist. How's it going?
Just great. The better for your asking. Thank you.
Cool. We also are still developing our studio, if you're watching this on YouTube, and it's coming along. We have our 2 cameras now. Boom, not 1 camera anymore.
There are 2 cameras here.
Yeah.
And Gilbert and Francis are taking a lie down right now,
Yeah.
They're not here right now.
As you can see, they were sick last time. But a lot of things have happened in the last week since we released the podcast Saint Chesterton. And now we're going to get to some stuff that's more relevant because we've been in the middle of election week, haven't we?
And some would consider that relevant.
Yeah.
I don't know why they consider that more relevant than a saint, but some would.
That's a good point. Well, we're going to talk about it, whether it's relevant or not. And everyone has had the election on their minds, and they're wondering what's next. So G.K. Chesterton, I know this because you told me this. G.K. Chesterton wrote an important book called What's Wrong with the World in 1910. But he also, the same year, wrote an essay called What's Right with the World. I did not know that came out the same year. Yeah, so he wrote both of them, and can we look to those sources to figure out what's next with the world?
Great question. Well, let's start with What's Wrong with the World. The book.
Yes.
The thesis of that book is that he identifies 4 things that are wrong with the world: big government, big business, feminism, and public education. Incredibly prophetic. He identifies that the big government and the big business together undermine the interests of the common man, who he calls Jones. He calls big government and big business Hudge and Gudge. They undermine Jones, who's just the average man who wants to get married, have a family, have a home, and be a local hero, right? Mm-hmm. And Hudge and Gudge are assisted by feminism, which is an attack on motherhood, and the great fruit of feminism in our time has been abortion, and he calls it women trying to be everything that a man is, but the one thing a man can never be is a mother, and so feminism is a movement away from motherhood. And then public education, the idea that the state can replace the parent in forming the minds and souls of children, and basically, without knowing what truth is, still decide that they're going to teach it to the children. Right. And he says that what all these 4 things suffer from is not only do they attack the family, but they all represent a failure to grasp a traditional truth, which is Christianity. And the great line that comes out of the book is, the Christian ideal has not been tried and found wanting. It's been found difficult and left untried. And it continues to be untried by Hudge and Gudge and the ones who have promoted a public solution to private problems.
I almost misquoted that from Orthodoxy when I was talking to Todd Warner. But I've corrected myself. I found the source, so it's all good.
So relieved. All right.
But sorry, continue.
Well, yeah. So that's the brief summary of What's Wrong with the World. His book from 1910.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So what did Chesterton get right in his essay, What's Right with the World?
Yeah, so he understands what's wrong with the world, but then what's right with the world.
Yeah.
The essay was almost written as a reaction to his own book. He was kind of called upon, because the book had quite a great success, and it was really on people's minds. And so he wrote this book, or this essay at the end of the year of 1910. It was in a Christmas number of a magazine, and basically the essay could be summed up with this other great line from the essay: what is wrong with the world is the devil, and what is right with it is God. And he says no matter how many new ideas and theories we try, the progressive theories will never improve on that thesis, much less replace it.
Okay. Gotcha. So the progressive idea is that everything is getting better, but why have the prophecies then of progressives failed? Why has that failed?
Well, okay, the progressive idea is that everything's getting better, right?
Yeah.
In fact, Chesterton puts it this way: that the progressive looks at the house of man not as a house but as a caravan. It's always moving, and it hasn't arrived yet. And he says the reason that it's such a destructive idea is that the people who hold these theories are unworldly in that they don't believe in another world. They're progressive, but they don't believe in another world. So they're trying to have this human solution that is completely disconnected from a heavenly solution. So that's why their prophecies fail. He says they also fail because they try to explain everything scientifically, sociologically, materialistically, and mankind never quite adapts to their explanations. He says it's because they never account for free will. Free will is something that you can never quantify and never predict how people are going to behave at a certain point. But even more so, they don't account for the normal, and they study the abnormal and try to extrapolate what the normal is based on studying the abnormal.
So taking someone who wants to better themselves, wants to improve themselves, become more disciplined, work on good habits, or at least good disciplines, or improve their skills. Wouldn't you say that they're progressing towards a good?
Okay, but what is their goal that they're progressing for? The progressive can never say what his goal is. Only that we're going to keep on keeping on.
Okay.
And so if you want to improve your discipline, your study skills, even your health, it's for a particular end in mind. And
it's not for the sake of progress.
Can't. There's no progress for progress' sake. It was just Chesterton came out of the 1890s where it was art for art's sake. In the 1910s, it was progress for progress' sake.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So, what does Chesterton say is right with the world?
Yeah, okay. So he says that what is right with the world is the world. It's the fact that it's God's creation. Mm-hmm. God created the world. That's what makes it good and great. And it's sort of, the opposite of the progressive idea, because the world itself was a great enterprise, says Chesterton.
Yeah.
What's wrong is nearly everything else. We have the story of creation, and then you have the fall. Things are good. They're not necessarily good at the end. We don't know how it's going to end in that sense. But the primordial things, existence, energy, fruition, those are good. Life is not evil. There are evil people in life, evil livers of life, but life isn't evil. Life is a good thing. Manhood and womanhood, he says, are good things, even though some men and women are pestilential, he says.
Nice. So would you say that the Christian ideal, the Christian view, is in effect the opposite of the progressive view that we're talking about? So instead of everything getting better, we actually start in the Christian idea of things, in the Christian story. We start with everything perfect, and then it goes downhill with the fall.
Yeah, and Chesterton says it in this essay. He goes, the ordinary modern progressive position is that this is a bad universe, but will certainly get better. I say it's certainly a good universe, even if it gets worse. I say that these trees and flowers, stars and sexes are primarily, not merely ultimately, good. In the beginning, the power beyond words created heaven and earth. In the beginning, he looked on them and he saw that they were good. So what happened? Right. the fall. Now, how does the fall specifically apply today? And here's where Chesterton is incredibly prolific. He's talking about what's wrong with our thinking right now. He talks about one of the ideas is this blending of men and women, of nations and nations. And he says that's a return to chaos.
Interesting. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And what he says is that normal people do not accept those ideas. Normal people still think about man and women reflecting each other like distant mirrors, and there's this wonder of man at nature, and that we have this wonderful kingdom of the childhood. Mm-hmm. And local affections and the color of certain landscapes, the local things that we love, that are not this blending of everything into everything else.
Cool. Wow. Yeah. That's very prophetic. Yeah. So kind of pivoting a little bit, what does Chesterton say is the danger facing the world at the present? That question usually comes up every election, regardless of what side you're on. That's the kind of when people start really pinpointing, whether they pinpoint it accurately or not. So what does Chesterton say?
This is interesting. He says the danger we're falling under right now, or may fall under right now, is that we'd fall under a new oligarchy, the oligarchy of prigs.
What are prigs? I forgot what prigs are.
Well, we should also talk about what oligarchy is. All right,
yeah,
so let's talk
about
both.
To know that one, but let's assume I don't know.
Let's assume you don't. Let's assume someone watching knows what a prig is, but doesn't know what an oligarchy is. Yeah. What does he mean? An oligarchy of prigs. Oligarchy means a small group that tries to rule everybody else. Okay, and by prig he means someone who has a very narrow vision, very self-righteous, and is very irritating. So a narrow, self-righteous, irritating person who's really just focusing on not the right things and not the universal truth. We would probably refer to a similar group of people in our time as the elite. Mm-hmm. The ones who actually do think they're better than everyone else and are therefore entitled to rule everybody else. That would be the oligarchy of prigs. And they would consider themselves educated, whereas they'd consider everybody else uneducated. But Chesterton says they're just badly educated, because everyone's educated, but some are just educated badly.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
So, let me just expand on that a little bit. Yeah. There's this is also very prophetic. In fact, here's another paragraph from that essay. He says, "A circle of small pedants sit on an upper platform." This is the elite. This is the oligarchy of prigs. "And they pass unanimously in a meeting of none that there's no difference between the social duties of men and women, the social instruction of men or of children, and below them boils that multitudinous sea of millions that think differently, that have always thought differently, and that always will think differently. But in spite of the overwhelming majority that maintains the old theory of life, I am in some real doubt about which will win, the elites or the multitudes. Owing to the decay of theology and all the other clear systems of thought, men have been thrown back very much upon their own instincts, as with animals. As with animals, their instincts are right, but as with animals, they can be cowed." Oh, wow. Isn't that interesting? Mm-hmm. So between the agile scholars and the stagnant mob, I'm really doubtful about which will be triumphant. I have no doubt about who ought to be.
Cool. Wow. Yeah. I mean, that's a good question. I mean, definitely in different periods of time or different events, one has triumphed over the other. He's asking long term, and I don't know. That's cool. And then I can see if some people get the impression, based off that we shouldn't have an elite, they conclude that something like capitalism is the answer. Well, no, that's another example of being ruled by the elite, just in a different conceptual way.
Right.
Yeah, you have Amazon and Apple and Microsoft. They kind of rule our lives.
Rule our lives, and we, they don't represent our thinking either.
Right.
And yet we've kind of been cowed by them.
Mm-hmm.
We
Yeah, in fact, everyone is addicted. I mean, we've proven that they're addicted to their phones. They want us to be with dopamine releases and stuff.
Yeah,
so how can you argue that you're not being enslaved in a certain way? Yeah, it goes back to this horseshoe effect, that it's Hudge and Gudge, right?
Mm-hmm,
Yeah. Okay, cool. So what does this have to do with the election?
I suppose we should get to that eventually. That was kind of the purpose. And here we are running out of time.
Next week.
Well, here it is. And Chesterton nails this in the conclusion of this essay. He says, at present, there's too much of a concentration on politics, which is partly the unfortunate result of our loss of religion. There's too much of a concentration on politics, which is partly the unfortunate result of a loss of religion. We're all looking for this political solution to everything, and it's not going to happen with the loss of religion.
Yeah. Okay, gotcha. So, in other words, we're trying to settle the secondary questions without considering the primary questions.
That's it. We're trying to settle the secondary questions without even considering the primary questions. And Chesterton, it's a marvelous paragraph from this essay, says, for at present we all tend to make one mistake. We tend to make politics too important. Mm-hmm. We tend to forget how huge a part of a man's life is the same under a sultan or a senate, mm-hmm. under Nero or St. Louis. Daybreak is a never-ending glory. Getting out of bed is a never-ending nuisance. Food and friends will be welcomed. Work and strangers must be accepted and endured. Birds will go bedwards, and children won't, to the end of the last evening. And the worst peril is that in our just modern revolt against intolerable accidents, which is what happens in a bad political system, we may unsettle those things which alone make daily life tolerable. It would be an ironic tragedy if when we've toiled to find rest, we find that we are incurably restless. Mm-hmm. And that's the danger right now. We are becoming incurably restless. Yeah. We're not addressing the needs of the soul.
Yeah, I believe Plato said that the goal of a society was to maximize leisure time. That was, at least he said that at one point, I think. And we're becoming more restless. It sounds like we're not making time for leisure anymore.
Yeah, and leisure, we've confused leisure with pleasure. We pursue pleasure, mm-hmm. but not the time to reflect, the quiet time
to pray, and
yeah. And the ironic thing, of course, other people have pointed this out. The irony of COVID and the shutdown is that people actually have had to sit in their room. Yeah. They've had to sit in their room, and yet they're so bad at doing that.
Yeah.
So,
that makes sense. Yeah. So one of the original questions was, "What's next?"
Yeah, what's next?
So, can we answer that? Yeah.
Well, of course, since we just criticized any theory that doesn't account for free will, we have to account for free will. Mm-hmm. It is up to us, but it's certainly up to us, whatever political system we get, that we make changes at the local and immediate level and start a revival from the grassroots. There's no top-down solutions. No matter which government we get, we will not be able to solve either our political or our larger problems with whoever's at top. It's up to us to identify those things that are wrong with the world and work to change them at a local level, starting with ourselves, our families, our neighborhoods, and that's how you create a revival, and that's how you transform a society. That's what's next, and if we don't do that, we are going to collapse.
Yep, I agree. That's great. And that was good without getting very specific at all, which is great.
That's what we're here for.
Yeah.
We should mention that this essay, "What's Right with the World? What is
Yes.
Right with the World?" is in Defense of Sanity, the best essays of G.K. Chesterton, available on our website.
It's available at our shop. Yep, chesterton.org/shop. You can find it there, and I'll put a link to it in the description on YouTube. And well, thank you for being with us.
What a pleasure.
Yes, and until next time, everyone, help us to make uncommon sense more common.